The man I had personally helped ascend the throne sent me away for a political marriage. After I gave birth to a son, he led thousands of troops to my kingdom, slaughtering everyone in his path. Choose between your husband and your child, he said. Inside the Phoenix Luan Palace, blood stained every inch of the floor, bodies lay scattered everywhere, and the air was filled with the heart-wrenching cries of palace servants. It was a living hell, through the sea of people. I locked eyes with Jiyu Hanju from afar. The man stood tall and handsome, yet an indescribable melancholy clouded his eyes. Jiyu Hanju's gaze was fixed on the little boy in my arms. After a long while, he spoke in a hoarse voice. "Is this your child?" I nodded, my slender hands trembling uncontrollably. The scars hidden beneath the glamorous facade were torn open again, bleeding profusely. The tragic day 5 years ago when the entire Prime Minister's mansion was executed was still vivid in my mind. Just like today, I looked around at the hellscape surrounding me, saying nothing. I knew that even if I spoke, Jiyu Hanju would never spare them. Jiyu Hanju was an extremely cold man. He only reserved a shred of tenderness for that one person. Jiyu Hanju waved his hand, and a gentle, refined man in white robes stained with blood, his hair disheveled, was dragged forward. It was my husband. The Emperor of Chengguo, Lu Yenruo. When I saw him, my eyes instantly welled up with tears. Yenruo. Lu Yenruo's mouth was gagged with a dirty cloth, rendering him unable to speak. He smiled at me softly, like a spring breeze brushing against my face, calming my heart. Jiyu Hanju channeled his inner strength, throwing a dagger at my feet. His voice was cold as ice. "Jin Xian, only one of Lu Yenruo and the child in your arms can live." I picked up the dagger and walked toward Lu Yenruo. Removing the cloth from his mouth, I traced his face carefully, that face that had always been as gentle as water, committing every feature to memory as if engraving them deep into my heart. The dagger pierced the man's abdomen, blood soaked my hands, the child's cries echoed behind me, but in that moment, I heard nothing. Only Lu Yenruo's words from a few days ago lingered in my ears. He had said, "If one day Chengguo falls, the Son of Heaven will die for his country. I will never live in disgrace," he had said. "When two nations go to war, one must always lose. Do not avenge me. Live the rest of your life happily," he had said. "Remember to protect yourself and Liqing. Do not wallow in sorrow ever again." Chengguo fell. I was taken back to Shiguo, my 3-year-old son. Lu Liqing was imprisoned in the cold palace, cared for by Dongmei, my personal maid who had grown up with me since childhood. Originally, Jiyu Hanju intended to let Liqing fend for himself. It was only after I threatened to take my own life that Dongmei was allowed to tend to him. I was confined in a side chamber of the Qianqing Palace, nameless and faceless, hidden away from the light of day. Every time I fell into a nightmare, I would relive the day I was first sent to Chengguo. The way Lu Yenruo smiled, every gesture he made. He was such a gentle man. He never looked down on me for my humble origins. Instead, he cared for me in every way, never forcing me to do anything against my will. How could someone so kind meet such a tragic end? It was Jiyu Hanju, that vicious, ruthless man, who deserved to die. One day, shouts erupted outside the Qianqing Palace. My heart twisted with a sharp pain, and I found myself rushing outside to see what was happening. The scene before me left me stunned. Dongmei, who had been like a sister to me since childhood, was lying on the ground with a sword through her abdomen. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Save, Liqing." Then she breathed her last. I pulled the hairpin from my head and pressed it against my neck. "Do not try to stop me," I said, "or I will die here, right in front of you." The guards dared not harm me, helpless to stop me as I marched toward the cold palace. Inside the cold palace, a 5-year-old boy was standing on Liqing's back, yelling insults. "You little bastard, your whore mother made my mother unhappy, so I'm going to kill you." Surrounding them, eunuchs punched and kicked Liqing. The small child lay on the ground, his breath growing faint. That 5-year-old boy was Jiyu Jian, the son of imperial concubine Xiao, spoiled rotten, pure, unadulterated evil. I pushed Jiyu Jian away in one swift motion, pulling Liqing tightly into my arms. The eunuchs stopped beating him at once, gathering around Jiyu Jian to fuss over him. Imperial concubine Xiao Mingzhu and Jiyu Hanju arrived moments later, one after the other. Xiao Mingzhu struck first, her voice dripping with false sorrow. "Your Majesty, my poor Jenna." She pushed him for no reason at all, and now his blood won't stop flowing. "I'm afraid it will take him 10 or 15 days to recover." Jiyu Hanju stared at me coldly. I made no attempt to defend myself, dropping to my knees and saying, "This common woman is guilty. I beg your Majesty to summon imperial physicians to treat my son. Afterward, I will submit to whatever punishment her imperial concubine deems fit." Liqing's breathing grew weaker by the second. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. He was Lu Yenruo's only surviving child. I could not let Lu Yenruo's line end with him. Jiyu Hanju spoke softly. "Why do you not defend yourself?" A bitter smile tugged at my lips as I repeated my plea, begging him to send for the physicians. There was no use in defending myself. Xiao Mingzhu was the white moonlight in Jiyu Hanzhou's heart, the one he cherished above all else. I was nothing more than the insignificant frost beneath his feet. 5 years ago, I had tried to defend myself, only to be punished by being forced to kneel outside the Chusho Palace for 3 days and 3 nights. Now, I cared about nothing but Liqing's safety. "Defend yourself," Jiyu Hanju suddenly said, "and I will summon the imperial physicians." My voice was hoarse as I replied. "It was the crown prince who attacked my son first. I only pushed him in return." Jiyu Hanzhou's lips curled into a cruel smile. "He is nothing but a bastard child," he said. "If he is beaten to death, he will have deserved it." In the end, the imperial physicians did arrive, but only to treat Jiyu Jian. Even though his injuries were merely superficial, he was treated like a precious treasure. Meanwhile, my Liqing lay on the verge of death, abandoned and ignored like a worthless weed. My scalding tears fell onto Liqing's pale little face. The child seemed to sense my presence, smiling up at me weakly and saying in broken words, "Mother, don't worry, I'm okay." If only I had not protected Jiyu Hanju all those years ago. If only I had not helped him ascend the throne. How could I have ended up in such a state? It was my sin to bear. So why did it have to be paid with the lives of my entire family, my husband, and my child? Jiyu Hanzhou's hands, hidden beneath his sleeves, clenched slightly. He let out a faint sigh and for some unknown reason, ordered the physicians to treat Liqing. The cold moon hung high in the sky, and night enveloped the entire palace. I knelt outside the Chusho Palace as heavy snow fell around me, the bitter cold piercing my bones to the marrow. Snowflakes landed on my eyelashes like tiny shards of ice. Inside the palace, the lights were bright, and the air was thick with the scent of incense. The shadows of a man and a woman intertwined on the windowpane, their voices of passion echoing through the night. I kowtowed repeatedly, shouting the words Xiao Mingzhu had commanded me to say, over and over again. "I, the lowly Shinjinxian, have failed to teach my son properly. I have offended the crown prince and deserve to die 1,000 deaths. I beg the crown prince for mercy. I, the lowly Shinjinxian." Dawn broke at last, painting the sky in shades of pale pink and gold. My legs had long since lost all feeling. The blood on my forehead had dried and caked, yet still, my mouth moved numbly, whispering those humiliating words. "I, the lowly Shinjinxian." The palace doors creaked open. Xiao Mingzhu stepped out, wrapped in a luxurious red fox fur cloak, holding a hand warmer in her arms. Supported by her maids, she looked down at me from above, her voice dripping with malice. "Shinjinxian, I am unreasonable and arrogant. So what? The emperor dotes on me. That is all that matters." As she spoke, she deliberately tilted her head, revealing her delicate neck covered in bright red hickeys, like blooming plum blossoms. I could not find the strength to speak. The cold had seeped into every fiber of my being, yet deep down, I knew that Xiao Mingzhu was right. Jiyu Hanju was a scheming, calculating emperor. He could tell right from wrong perfectly well. It all came down to one simple thing. Love, or lack thereof. Xiao Mingzhu grabbed my chin, forcing me to look up at her. Shenjinxian, she sneered, you planted the tree, and now I get to enjoy its shade. That is your miserable fate. I suddenly spat out a mouthful of black, blood-stained phlegm. Lu Yenruo's voice echoed in my ears once more. Jin Xian is destined to be cherished and protected for the rest of her life. She should smile more. Tears filled my eyes, and for a moment, I felt utterly lost. Was this truly my fate? To lose everything I held dear, to never know happiness again. The look of disgust vanished from Xiao Mingzhu's face in an instant. She turned and ran toward the man standing tall and straight at the palace gate, a bright smile on her lips. Jiyu Hanju took her hand, his voice soft with tenderness. Has my Mingzhu calmed down now? Xiao Mingzhu pouted playfully. Not quite, she said. But if this criminal is willing to let Liqing be my jealous playmate for a month, I might just find it in my heart to forgive her. Jiyu Hanju smiled indulgently. He is just a child, he said. It is an honor for Liqing to be the crown prince's playmate. From today onward, Liqing will stay by the crown prince's side. With a few casual words, the two of them decided Liqing's fate. I stared at them in horror, my voice weak and trembling. Your Majesty, please, you must not. If her imperial concubine has not yet calmed down, I will kneel here until she finds it in her heart to forgive me. Jiyu Hanzhou's eyebrows furrowed almost imperceptibly. His gaze was unreadable as he stared straight at me. No one can interfere with what my Mingzhu wants, he said. Those were the words of her emperor. Xiao Mingzhu shot me a triumphant smile, her eyes brimming with undisguised mockery. But all I could think about was Liqing. He was still just a child, under the crown prince's torment. Would he even survive another month? No one cared about my despair. In the end, Liqing was sent away to be the crown prince's companion. The next time I saw Liqing was at the hunting grounds. He was wearing a thin indigo robe, his face pale as a sheet, kneeling at the feet of Crown Prince Jiyu Jian. He had the dignity of a green bamboo, yet his back was bent, broken by humiliation. I sat at the very back of the banquet, my face hidden behind a veil, afraid to reveal my true identity. This was the only chance I had begged Jiyu Hanju for, to see my son. Jiyu Jian suddenly stamped hard on Liqing's leg, his eyes narrowing in pleasure. You little bastard were born to be my footstool, he said. His voice was neither too loud nor too soft, barely audible over the noise of the hunting grounds. But I, who had been watching Liqing every second, heard every single word loud and clear. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood, my eyebrows knitting together tightly, struggling to hold back the tears that threatened to spill over. My poor Liqing was still so young, yet he was being forced to endure such unspeakable humiliation. It was all my fault. If I had not been so stubborn, if I had not insisted on helping Jiyu Hanju ascend the throne, my child would never have been reduced to such a state. The hunt was about to begin. Jiyu Jian opened his mouth, his childish voice sending me plummeting into the depths of hell. Let's have some fun this year at the hunt, he announced. My companion here runs extremely fast. Later, he will be our prey. Whoever shoots him with the most arrows will receive a great reward from me. Using a living person as prey, what a vicious, cruel idea. Yet the crowd erupted into enthusiastic applause, praising Jiyu Jian for his creative thinking. I turned my desperate gaze to Jiyu Hanju, my lips moving silently. Please, no, for the sake of our 10 years together, would he not spare my Liqing just this once? When he was a child, he had been bullied relentlessly. Every single time I had stood in front of him, protecting him from harm. Could he not repay me just this once? Just this one time? Jiyu Hanzhou's cold eyes flicked toward me. He saw my silent plea, and yet, he only smiled coldly and said, "The Crown Prince has a wonderful idea. Let your companion take the field as prey." In that moment, I felt as if I had been thrown into an icy abyss. Licheng's eyes met mine. The small child looked at me and smiled a smile of acceptance, as if he was ready to die. "Be happy," he mouthed. Licheng's voice rang out loud and clear. Everyone else was left confused, but I knew those words were meant for me alone. How could someone as kind as Lu Yenruo end up in such a tragic state? Besides, if he died, I would truly be left all alone in this world. How could I ever be happy again? What would there be left to live for? A gong sounded, and the hunt began. My Licheng ran for his life across the field, fleeing alongside the animals, yet countless young nobles, eager to curry favor with the Crown Prince, aimed their arrows at him without mercy. My eyes burned with rage and pain. I could no longer bear to watch. With lightning speed, I rushed forward to shield Licheng from the sharp, deadly arrows. My robes were torn to shreds, blood blooming across the fabric like crimson flowers. I gritted my teeth against the searing pain, clinging tightly to Licheng to shield him from harm. Arrows rained down on us like a relentless storm. I dodged as best I could, biting back screams of agony, but several arrows found their mark, piercing my flesh. The nobles, who cared nothing for human life, did not stop just because a woman had thrown herself into the fray. Instead, they grew even more excited by the spectacle. My vision began to blur, darkening at the edges. All I could hear was Licheng's heart-wrenching sobs, echoing in my ears. "Stop," a cold, sharp voice commanded. It was the last thing I heard before everything went black. When I woke up again, Jiyu Hanzhou stood by my bed, his features as cold and stern as ever. I tried to lift my hand, but a wave of excruciating pain shot through my body, like 1,000 ants gnawing at my heart. The sight of Jiyu Hanzhou filled me with a burning, uncontrollable hatred. My family, my child, Dongmei, Lu Yenruo, all of them had suffered unspeakably because of the man standing before me. "You bastard," I whispered, my voice hoarse yet filled with unshakable resolve. "I should have let them beat you to death all those years ago." I still remembered the first time I had met Jiyu Hanzhou. He had been surrounded by bullies, cowardly eunuchs who picked on the weak and left half dead on the ground. Yet his eyes had shone brightly, full of life and defiance, making it impossible for anyone with a shred of compassion to turn away. I had chased the eunuchs away and saved him, but he had repaid my kindness with betrayal. Now I understood the old saying, "Those who seem pitiful always have something hateful about them." I should have ignored him that day, walked straight past him and left him to his fate. Jiyu Hanzhou looked stunned for a moment, a flush creeping up the tips of his ears. He reached out to touch my forehead, as if checking if I had a fever that had made me speak such cruel words, but I stared back at him unflinchingly, repeating my accusation with even more venom. "You are nothing but a vicious, heartless bastard." Jiyu Hanzhou's mother had been a lowly concubine who had been caught in an adulterous affair. She had been put to death by 1,000 cuts, a slow and agonizing punishment. The late emperor had been furious, yet in the end, his heart had softened. Instead of executing the 6-year-old Jiyu Hanzhou, he had simply thrown him into the cold palace to fend for himself, ignoring his existence entirely. Even the palace dogs had dared to bully Jiyu Hanzhou back then. I, however, was the legitimate daughter of the prime minister, clever, charming, and beloved by the late emperor. I had been free to roam the palace as I pleased. By chance, I had discovered Jiyu Hanzhou being bullied and stepped in to save him. That was the day I fell into an endless abyss, from which I could never escape. Storm clouds gathered in Jiyu Hanzhou's jet-black eyes. He was so angry he laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "I am the son of heaven, the emperor of this land. You can keep that title of bastard for your dying son." My mind cleared, and a bitter smile tugged at my lips. "If Licheng dies, I will die with him." You cannot bear to let me die, can you, Jiyu Hanju? We had spent 10 years together, knowing each other better than anyone else. If Jiyu Hanju truly hated me, he would never have saved my life. Jiyu Hanju fled the room like a clown whose deepest secret had been exposed, leaving me alone to laugh hysterically. What was it that he could not bear to lose? The only warmth he had ever known in his life. He had grown up being called a bastard by everyone, day in and day out. I was the only one foolish enough to help him, to see him as something more than a worthless outcast. How could he bear to let me die? I had been so kind to him, even a dog would have shown more gratitude than he had. The moon hung low in the sky, and night fell once more. Inside the Chusho Palace, the curtains were drawn, and the air was thick with the scent of love and desire. Jiyu Hanjo's cheeks were flushed with passion as he leaned down to whisper in Qiao Mingzhu's ear, his voice tinged with a hint of childish grievance. How could you call me a bastard? How could you join the others in mocking me? As he spoke, his voice grew even more upset, almost tearful. Qiao Mingzhu froze for a moment, her face paling slightly, before she replied in a soft, soothing voice, Your Majesty, look closely. Who am I? None of what happened in the Chusho Palace reached the side chamber of the Qianqing Palace where I was imprisoned. I was too busy worrying about Liqing's fate. The Crown Prince had failed to kill him during the hunt. He would undoubtedly come up with other, even more cruel schemes to finish the job. That 5-year-old boy was pure, unadulterated evil. I could not stop worrying about him for a single moment. Early the next morning, an unexpected visitor arrived at my chamber. Qiao Mingzhu stood before me, dressed in luxurious silk robes adorned with gold hairpins, her face twisted with rage. Anger blazed in her eyes as she spat out her words, her voice dripping with venom. Why don't you just die? Go join your short-lived husband in the afterlife. I frowned, my voice soft yet firm as I defended the man I loved. Lu Yenruo was not short-lived. He was the kindest man in the entire world. Qiao Mingzhu let out a cold, mocking laugh. Not only was Lu Yenruo short-lived, but your precious son Liqing, I will skin him alive, tear out his tendons, and feed his flesh to the dogs. As she spoke, she curved her lips into a cruel smile, her eyes glinting with malice. Then I will cut off his head and make soup out of it for you to drink. A wave of nausea washed over me. Beneath her beautiful, delicate features lay a heart as black and rotten as the deepest, darkest cesspool. Suddenly, Qiao Mingzhu let out a shriek and collapsed backward onto the floor. Bright red blood seeped out from beneath her skirt, a horrifying, gruesome sight. She curved her lips into a triumphant smile, mouthing the words silently, You're finished. Sure enough, the next moment, Jiyu Hanju burst into the room, dressed in his imperial yellow robes. His face filled with panic. The maids who had accompanied Qiao Mingzhu immediately began shouting accusations at me, claiming I had pushed her and begging Jiyu Hanju to punish me severely. A loud slap echoed through the room. I fell to the ground, clutching my stinging cheek, my ears ringing with the force of the blow. The maids' angry shouts faded into a faint, distant buzz. The man who had struck me lifted Qiao Mingzhu into his arms and stormed out of the room, pausing only to snarl at me over his shoulder, If anything happens to Mingzhu, I will tear you apart piece by piece. I was left alone on the cold floor. The maids' mouths continued to move, but the sound grew fainter and fainter until it disappeared completely. I stood up, almost delirious with rage, and grabbed a teacup from the table, smashing it violently onto the ground. The teacup shattered into 1,000 pieces. The maids finally reacted, rushing forward to restrain me. I stared blankly at the shards of porcelain scattered across the floor, laughing a broken, bitter laugh. I was deaf. Tears filled my eyes as I mocked my own foolishness. Memories of that terrible, nightmare-like day came flooding back to me, unbidden, when we were children. Jiyu Hanju had attacked the crown prince in a fit of anger. He had been thrown into the imperial prison and sentenced to death. I could not bear to see him die. So I knelt on the freezing cold white jade pavement, begging the emperor to spare his life. The crown prince's mother, the empress, came from a powerful family that rivaled the prime ministers in influence, and the two families were bitter enemies. She had deliberately humiliated me, ordering her maids to slap me 50 times before she would agree to spare Jiyu Hanzhou's life. I had endured every single slap without a single cry of pain. At the time, blood had poured from my ears, leaving me with a permanent injury. My ears could never withstand pain again. Later, when Jiyu Hanzhou was released from prison, he had thrown himself into my arms, weeping uncontrollably. He had told me that everyone else in the world saw him as nothing more than an ant, a worthless nobody, but not me. He had promised that when he grew up, he would protect me for the rest of my life and make me the happiest woman in the entire world. The execution of my entire family, being sent to a foreign country as a political pawn, only to have my life destroyed, losing my hearing. So this was his idea of making me happy. Qiao Mingzhu had miscarried. I was thrown into the imperial dungeon, where the jailers, who had clearly been bribed, began torturing me without any authorization. They picked up a whip soaked in salt water and lashed it against my thin, fragile body, leaving deep, red welts in its wake. I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood, sweat dripping down my face, my strength fading fast. Just as I was about to lose consciousness, the dungeon door creaked open. Jiyu Hanzhou stepped into the cell, dressed in a deep purple robe, his handsome features as cold and stern as ever. He saw the jailers torturing me, but he did not say a word of reproach. He simply waved his hand, ordering them to leave. In Chen Guo, torturing prisoners without authorization was a crime punishable by the execution of one's entire family. But when the prisoner being tortured was me, it was somehow not a crime at all, because I had harmed Qiao Mingzhu and caused her to miscarry. My life was worth less than that of a stray dog in Jiyu Hanzhou's eyes. Once the jailers had left, the man turned to me, his obsidian black eyes staring into mine, as if trying to see straight into my soul. "Bear me a child," Jiyu Hanzhou said, "and you will live." But I could not hear a word he said. I could only stare back at him, my eyes burning with hatred and rage. He seemed to repeat his words, but I still heard nothing. Confusion flickered across Jiyu Hanzhou's handsome face. He suddenly stepped closer, taking my hand in his, and began to write slowly on my palm with his finger. "Have you lost your hearing?" I curved my lips into a cold, mocking smile, my voice dripping with bitterness. "All those years ago, I injured my ears saving your life. Now I have gone completely deaf. I blame no one but myself for saving an ungrateful, heartless beast who cannot be tamed." Jiyu Hanzhou's eyes darkened, a storm of conflicting emotions swirling within their depths. Finally, he wrote a single line of words on my palm with his finger. Moments later, I was lifted into his arms and carried out of the dungeon. I sat on the edge of the bed, wearing a flowing red dress adorned with pearls, the fabric making my skin look even paler than before. A red veil covered my face, obscuring my vision. I could not help but laugh at how ridiculous Jiyu Hanzhou was being. The line he had written on my palm was simple, absurd, almost laughable. "Do not hate me," as I lost myself in these thoughts. The door creaked open. Jiyu Hanzhou stood in the doorway, dressed in a red wedding robe, a smile playing on his lips. He looked as handsome and elegant as a scholar in a painting. His demeanor warm and gentle, yet I knew it was all a lie. He lifted the red veil from my face, picked me up in his arms, and whispered softly to himself, as if talking to no one but himself, "Jin Xian, you have always been mine." I tried to struggle, to fight him off, but my body felt heavy and weak as if I had been drugged. I could not summon an ounce of strength. When Jiyu Hanzhou pressed himself against me, the terror in my eyes could no longer be hidden, but the man ignored my silent pleas, forcing himself into me with brutal, ruthless force. My wounds tore open, and a wave of searing, unbearable pain shot through my body. Yet my mind was filled with nothing but thoughts of Lu Yenruo, that gentle, kind man like jade carved by the gods, like a prince from a fairy tale, would never have forced me to do anything against my will. I still remembered the first time I had been sent to Chen Guo. Lu Yenruo's smile had been as bright as the stars in the night sky. His demeanor as warm and gentle as a spring breeze. He had always asked for my consent before doing anything. He had even played the zither for me himself, just to see me smile even though he was the emperor of a nation, such a kind, wonderful man, yet he had been forced to die by my own hand. As the pain reached its unbearable peak, my mind grew hazy, and I whispered his name, my voice barely audible, Lu Yenruo, I'm sorry. Jiyu Hanju was a skilled martial artist with profound inner strength. He heard every word clearly. He leaned down and bit my lip, hard enough to draw blood. The metallic taste of blood bloomed on his lips, crimson flowers against his pale skin. Don't you dare think about anyone else, he snarled, his voice filled with rage and jealousy. He stole 5 years of your life from me. He and that bastard child of his both deserve to die, if it weren't for the fact that he was afraid Liqing's death would leave Jin Xian with no one left to live for. He would never have let that child survive. After that night, Jiyu Hanju sent imperial physicians to check on me every single day. Finally, when they confirmed I was pregnant, he stopped visiting my chamber in the Qianqing Palace. But the physicians continued to come every day. They cured my deafness and brought me countless tonics to help me with my pregnancy. Because I had lost the emperor's favor, the palace servants began to treat me with contempt and neglect, hoping to curry favor with Qiao Mingzhu by humiliating me. I subsisted on cold leftovers, and even in the bitter depths of winter, I had no charcoal to keep me warm, but I did not care about any of these hardships. 3 months later, in the side chamber of the Qianqing Palace, I ran a hand over my slightly swollen belly, my mind drifting into a haze. I had wanted to abort the child, but Jiyu Hanju had threatened me with Liqing's life, leaving me drowning in a sea of guilt and self-blame. Guilt towards Lu Yenruo, who lay cold in his grave. Self-blame for my own powerlessness, unable to protect even Lu Yenruo's only surviving child. A loud bang echoed through the room. A drunk and disheveled Jiyu Hanju kicked the door open. The once warm and gentle look in his eyes was now clouded over with a cold, unyielding frost. There was no charcoal burning in the room, and Jiyu Hanju's body trembled slightly as he pulled me into his arms, clutching my ice-cold hands tightly. Those palace servants are becoming more and more audacious, defying my orders behind my back, he growled, his voice thick with anger and something else I could not quite place. I said nothing, but Jiyu Hanju buried his face in the crook of my neck, taking several deep breaths before speaking, his voice cracking with emotion. Jin Xian, you're ignoring me again. If only you had begged me 5 years ago, how could we have grown so far apart? I pushed him away roughly, my voice trembling with rage. Don't push your luck too far. 5 years ago, it was he who had ordered the execution of my entire family first. Now he had the audacity to act as if it were all my fault. Jiyu Hanju muttered under his breath, his eyes blazing with a fierce, possessive light. Shen Jinxian, send for Liqing. Let him see you like this. Let him know that you are mine now and forever. My head shot up instantly, my eyes widening in horror as I stared at him, cursing through gritted teeth. Have you gone completely mad? My Liqing was still just a child. How would he feel when he saw my swollen belly? The tips of Jiyu Hanju's ears turned red, his voice rising with passion. I'm not mad. You were always meant to be mine. You never should have given birth to another man's child. You never should have betrayed me. In the end, Liqing was brought to me anyway. He was as thin as a rake. His once fine robes faded to a pale, washed-out gray, a long, ugly scar slashing across the corner of his eye that could not be ignored. I dropped my gaze instinctively, unable to meet his eyes, my heart aching with a pain so sharp it was almost unbearable. Mother, Licheng called out to me softly, and what he said next brought tears streaming down my face. "You've suffered so much. Mother, no matter what you do, I will always love you." His voice was still young and childish, yet filled with an unshakable resolve. I lifted my head abruptly, cupping his face in my hands, my voice thick with tears. "I'm so sorry. It was my fault for misjudging a man's character all those years ago. It was my fault for being so powerless now." I had reduced Licheng, who should have grown up spoiled and pampered in luxury, to such a pitiful state. "You have nothing to apologize for, Mother. You have never done anything to betray me." I suddenly remembered the days in Chengguo, when I had been consumed by grief over the execution of my family. Lu Yenruo, with his gentle, scholarly demeanor and eyes like a sea of stars, had comforted me softly. "You have never wronged anyone. It is just that the ways of this world and the hearts of men are unpredictable. Do not dwell on it." Yet now I was carrying the child of my sworn enemy, imprisoned in this cold, lonely palace, with no way to escape. Jiyu Hanju, who had been standing silently in the shadows all this time, suddenly burst into a cold, mocking laugh. "What a touching mother-son bond. But Jin Xian is mine. She has been carrying my child for over 3 months now, and as for this bastard, whether he lives or dies depends entirely on my mood." My body trembled slightly as I stared at Licheng intently, afraid to see any sign of hurt or betrayal in his eyes. But Licheng simply looked at me calmly, his voice steady and clear. "Mother has always been her own person. Even if she is pregnant, she will always be the mother I respect and adore for the rest of my life." Later, Jiyu Hanju sobered up, but my hatred for him only grew stronger with each passing day. I would often stroke my growing belly when I was alone, a thought lingering in my mind: death would be better than living like this. The rivers of blood from the execution of my family, the piles of corpses when Chengguo fell, every horrific scene played on a loop in my mind, impossible to erase. I would often dream of the innocence of my childhood when my parents were still alive, when the Prime Minister's mansion was at the height of its power and glory. I would often zone out, lost in my thoughts, and see Lu Yenruo standing before me, smiling gently as he chatted with me about nothing and everything. But in the blink of an eye, I would see the dagger I had plunged into his abdomen, watching him collapse to the ground, his life draining away. Habit truly was a terrifying thing. It turned out that Lu Yenruo's gentle, polite treatment of me had long since been etched into my very bones. I was trapped in a state of constant anxiety, unable to save myself, the thought of suicide lingering at the back of my mind like a shadow. During this time, Jiyu Hanju noticed that something was wrong with me. To stabilize my emotions, he allowed Licheng to come and stay with me. Licheng took my hand in his small, warm one, his voice soft yet filled with a wisdom beyond his years. "Mother, if living is too painful for you, you don't have to worry about me. I can take care of myself alone." I buried my face in my hands, sobbing uncontrollably. I knew he was lying to me. How could he possibly survive alone in the imperial palace of an enemy country? He simply saw how much I was suffering and could not bear to watch me endure it any longer. Another month passed, and I could not hold on any longer. I had already failed so many people in my life, I might as well pay for my sins with my death. At least I would be taking Jiyu Hanjo's child with me, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. It would not be a loss. I looked around the room. Every sharp object that could be used for suicide had long since been taken away, but Jiyu Hanju had made one fatal mistake after all. That night, after I finished my cold dinner, the palace maid cleared the dishes away as usual, her movements lazy and indifferent. I sat alone on the rosewood chair, holding a shard of white porcelain in my hand, a silent smile playing on my lips. I had gotten it by breaking an unremarkable small bowl. All I had to do was make a single, quick slash across my neck. I would no longer have to suffer. This painful, miserable life of mine would finally come to an end. Lost in my thoughts, I pressed the porcelain shard firmly against my neck, but then my abdomen suddenly twitched. I froze for a split second. This was my child too. He must have sensed what I was about to do. My abdomen twitched again, but I did not soften my resolve. Jiyu Hanju was a ruthless, evil man. He did not deserve to have a child with me. Besides, given my current situation, the child would only face endless discrimination and abuse if he were born into this world. What was the point of bringing him into such a cruel, unforgiving world? Tears blurred my vision before I knew it. I tightened my grip on the porcelain shard and slashed it across my neck with all my strength. Blood streamed down my slender fingers. Warm and sticky, I drifted into a daze. The world around me fading into darkness. Only a single spot of light glowed in the center of the void, like a lotus leaf floating on the water. I followed the light, and there I saw a little boy, about 4 years old, wrapped in a lotus flower. He smiled at me, his eyes bright and innocent. Mother! I stopped in my tracks instantly, a flood of complex emotions surging through my heart. The little boy stood up, his face filled with joy, and stumbled toward me, holding out his small, chubby hands. Mother, hug me, Tilda. I reached out my hand involuntarily, but my fingers passed straight through his body. Blood began to seep from his eyes and mouth, yet his smile remained eerie and beautiful. I know Mother wants me to die, but I don't blame you, Mother, as long as you are happy. I shook my head frantically, wanting to explain myself, but I could not find the words to say. I watched helplessly as the little boy's figure faded away, his voice echoing in the void. Repeating those words over and over again, a smile on his lips until the very end. I don't blame you, Mother. Something inside my chest seemed to shatter, a wave of bitterness washing over me that was impossible to put into words. Mother, wake up, please wake up, a familiar voice echoed in my ears. I struggled to open my eyes, a sharp pain shooting through my neck. Licheng stood by my bed, the tears on his face long since dried, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and heartache. I forced a smile, my voice weak and hoarse. It's okay, don't be afraid. Jiyu Hanju was a paranoid, ruthless man. Without me, Licheng would never survive. At the end of the day, my Licheng was still just a child. How could he not be afraid of death? The door slammed open. Jiyu Hanju stood in the doorway, staring at me with cold, icy eyes. How dare you take my child's life with yours? I laughed bitterly, a harsh, grating sound, given the way things are now. He would only follow in your footsteps if he were born, but there will never be another Shen Jinxian in this world. If the child were to survive, he would only face a lifetime of humiliation and suffering, a fate worse than death. It would be a miracle if he even made it to adulthood. Jiyu Hanju drew his long sword in a flash, pressing the sharp blade against Licheng's neck. If my child dies, this bastard will be cut into 1,000 pieces. His flesh will be fed to the dogs. His body thrown into a mass grave, doomed to wander the earth for eternity without peace. A wave of cold terror washed over my body, chilling me to the bone. I gritted my teeth, my voice trembling with rage. You truly are the most vicious man alive. Jiyu Hanju did not care in the slightest, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Is this the first day you've known me, Jin Xian? I caved in instantly. The horrific memory of my family's execution flashing before my eyes, heads rolling on the ground, rivers of blood flowing through the streets. Back then, Jiyu Hanju, still a young boy, had walked through the sea of blood with a smile on his face, saying to me, now Jin Xian and I are both alone in this world. Are you happy? How could I ever have expected a monster like him to have even an ounce of humanity? I spoke softly, my voice filled with defeat. Don't hurt Licheng. But Jiyu Hanju suddenly flew into a rage, using his sword to slice through Licheng's tendons. Blood gushed forth, the wound deep enough to see the bone. My voice shook with horror, my body trembling uncontrollably. What are you doing? Jiyu Hanju said nothing, ordering his men to drag Licheng away. Then he turned to me, a cold, mocking smile on his lips. "You were willing to die with my child. Yet you—" I cut him off sharply, my voice filled with hatred. "Shut up. You are not worthy to mention Lu Yenruo's name." A flicker of loneliness flashed across Jiyu Hanzhou's eyes, almost imperceptible. "You're right, I'm not worthy to mention him. After all, he's been dead for years, reduced to a pile of white bones by now. Mentioning him is nothing but bad luck." With that, he flung his sleeves and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him with a loud bang. Later, Jiyu Hanzhou, afraid that I would attempt suicide again, ordered Liqing to stay with me in the side chamber of the Qianqing Palace day and night. Every day, I looked at Liqing with his clear, bright eyes and gentle, upright demeanor, and I could no longer bring myself to commit suicide and leave him behind. His life had only just begun. How could I be so selfish as to condemn him to death for my own sake? Winter turned to spring, and my time to give birth finally arrived. Palace maids bustled in and out of the room, carrying basins of hot water. The midwife kept urging me to push harder. With a loud, healthy cry from the baby, I collapsed onto the bed, completely exhausted. "It's a boy, a healthy, chubby little boy." The midwife beamed with joy, wrapping the baby in swaddling clothes and bringing him over to my bedside. Perhaps it was the bond of blood, but I found myself lifting my head involuntarily to look at the child. His face was wrinkled and red, his cries loud and insistent. Jiyu Hanzhou, dressed in a deep purple robe, walked into the room, followed by Qiao Mingzhu, who wore a pale purple dress and a smile on her face. My heart skipped a beat, a sense of foreboding washing over me as I stared at Qiao Mingzhu defensively. She could not have come here for any good reason. Sure enough, Qiao Mingzhu took the crying baby from the midwife's arms, a cold, cruel smile playing on her lips. "Your Majesty, you are so kind to me. That woman caused me to miscarry, making it impossible for me to have children ever again. I told you I wanted a child to keep the Crown Prince company, so you endured the disgust of lying with her to have this baby for me." I felt as if I had been struck by lightning, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. So that was why Jiyu Hanzhou had been so careful to prevent me from committing suicide these past few months. So that was the truth. So that was it. But Qiao Mingzhu was a woman with a vicious, scheming heart. How could she possibly want my child to keep the Crown Prince company? If this child were handed over to Qiao Mingzhu, he would never live to see his first birthday. Qiao Mingzhu pouted playfully, turning to Jiyu Hanzhou with a sweet smile. "But Your Majesty, that Liqing is such a sensible, hard-working child. I've grown a little attached to him. Why don't we let her choose which child she wants to raise under my care?" Jiyu Hanzhou looked at her with affection, his voice soft and indulgent. "Whatever my Mingzhu wants, my Mingzhu shall have." A searing pain tore through my chest, as if someone were ripping my heart out of my body alive. He was forcing me to choose which one of my children to condemn to death with my own hands. Or, the baby in Qiao Mingzhu's arms seemed to sense the danger, his cries growing louder and louder, echoing through the room. I glanced at the infant, his pitch-black, bright eyes brimming with curiosity about the world around him. Strangely enough, the moment our gazes met, he stopped crying at once and broke into a toothless grin instead, as if he were trying to cheer me up. I lowered my eyes, refusing to look at him again, pressing my lips together before speaking. "Younger children are easier to bond with. Let the younger one be raised under her imperial concubine's care, to accompany the crown prince." Lu Yenruo had treated me with such boundless tenderness. When forced to choose between the two, I would never abandon his child and mine. I forced down the searing pain in my chest, repeating over and over in my mind, "This child is Jiyu Hanzhou's. His life or death has nothing to do with me." Qiao Mingzhu smiled sweetly. "This child hasn't been named yet. What about Jinwei?" Jiyu Hanzhou replied distractedly, "It's perfect." After that day, the side chamber of the Qianqing Palace grew even more desolate and cold. The palace servants neglected their duties, doing everything perfunctorily. I often stared at Licheng in a daze. He was growing more and more like Lu Yenruo with each passing day. For some reason, whenever I thought of Lu Yenruo these days, my heart ached unbearably, as if it were being torn apart. The image of me stabbing Lu Yenruo to death kept replaying in my mind, on a never-ending loop. Fortunately, Licheng's wounds finally healed. The days were tough, but at least there was no more trouble or strife. The next time I heard news of Jiyu Jinwei was a month later, when a palace maid burst into the room in a hurry, her face filled with anxiety. Her imperial concubine requests your presence at once. I stood up instinctively, my feet moving quickly toward the Chusho Palace. My mind went completely blank, and the name Jiyu Jinwei rose uncontrollably to the forefront of my thoughts. When I arrived at the Chusho Palace, Jiyu Hanju was holding the tear-streaked Qiao Mingzhu in his arms, comforting her gently. A wave of cold dread washed over my entire body, and a sharp, inexplicable pain shot through my chest. "Sister," Qiao Mingzhu whimpered, her voice dripping with false sorrow. "It was my fault for not supervising the maids properly. I let Jinwei be smothered to death." Qiao Mingzhu sobbed and wept. But a triumphant glint flickered in her crystal-clear eyes, not a trace of guilt to be seen. I had no desire to speak to her. The words "smothered to death" kept echoing in my ears, over and over again. I walked inside, and there I saw Jiyu Jinwei, wrapped in his swaddling clothes. His face was purple, and there was an unmistakable red handprint around his tender white neck. He wasn't smothered to death, I suddenly roared, tears streaming down my face before I even realized it. He had been strangled to death with bare hands, so obvious. How could Jiyu Hanju not have seen it? It was nothing more than him turning a blind eye, indulging Qiao Mingzhu's evil